We negotiated accordingly to a solid price. He brought in the buyer at a higher price. We knew where the repairs would be, so we can actually have a decent idea of how to bake in our actual fee for someone to for someone to buy that contract from us. And then it went from there. Don't do it alone. Don't do it by yourself.
Welcome to another episode of Fund, Flip, Repeat. My name is Ryan, and I am your local private money lender in Texas, in DFW. Joel, my brother, normally co-hosts with me. He's your local private money lender in Oklahoma, but he is traveling today. So I'm flying solo, but not completely solo. So I've got two awesome guys here with me today, local investors here in DFW and business partners, Paul Carlson and Mumbo Williams. Paul and Mumbo, thanks for being here today, guys.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing us on.
Pleasure to be.
Awesome. Let's just dive right into it and get straight to the point. So I like to always start with the background, with the basics, your story. Tell me, each one of you, quickly, just what were you doing before real estate and what made you catch the bug, and what was that spark where you're like, man, I want to be a real estate investor?
Mumbo, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. Started in 2019 after graduating college. I was a full-time student and a full-time employee at the university, making double the money on scholarships and grants, and had about $50K that was saved up after graduation. And after working for about a year, realized that I wasn't doing the thing that I wanted to do, which I went to school for community development. And to develop a community, you got to know something about real estate. And so I figured, well, let me go ahead and jump into housing and affect what that could actually do. I end up moving in that area, found YouTube University, seen some guys on a podcast, and this guy was just like, hey, I have a free course right now. It will learn how to wholesale, and I learn how to wholesale contracts and what is wholesale, and I'll teach you what that actually looks like. So while working full time, making like 27,000 a year, end up flipping my first contract like within 3 months, and that was like 35,000. And by that thing, I'm in. Like we're locked in now. And over the span of like a year or two, that just became my full-time focus. I knew how to run a call center, I knew how to run a team, I knew how to talk to people, and I knew how to get the deal done. And so that's where the bug was caught for me.
Awesome.
How about you, Paul?
Sure. So I started real estate pretty much out of college. It wasn't immediately. I got out. I knew I didn't want a job. I knew I eventually wanted to end up in real estate, and I ended up getting a position at one of these roofing companies where I was door knocking and all of that. And it was just trying to figure out how to make a little money while I figured out how to make it work. And I just networked a ton. And I kept networking. And eventually I was able to get my first deal through that because somebody called me up for some repairs and I was able to negotiate that. But what was the thing that made me interested in real estate was when I was a kid. It was my grandfather. He was a missionary over in Peru. He had a house in Duncanville. It wasn't a particularly expensive home, but he had a renter in it. While he was missionary, came back, wanted his house back. They said, hey, we've been your renter for 20 years. Can you give us some time? He said, how about I just raise it a little bit and you stay? He went, purchased another house, and then he just paid it off as aggressively as possible. And he ended up paying it off in 6 years. And then he bought a third house and did the same thing. By the time he died, that third house was almost paid off. And so that gave my grandmother a small retirement income from missionary income, which is usually not much. And so she was able to live with that. And that kind of showed me something that in a relatively short amount of time, you actually can put something together with real estate. And so I knew I didn't want the normal 9 to 5. And so that was the route I took.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for sharing that. Yeah. Paul and I both share that missionary connection in the families. And if you had any doubt that we're in Texas today, he's got his Buc-ee's mug. I've got my Hutchins barbecue. So we're definitely repping Texas today. So I want to move to the next question for you guys. Thinking about that first deal, right? When you really caught the bug, what did you learn from that first deal? And looking back now, is there anything that you would have done differently?
Mumbo?
You have the craziest first deal story. I'm not going to lie.
I do.
So on my side, I don't know if it was anything necessarily that would have been different. I think I did exactly what I would prefer to do today, which was not overanalyze, just literally jump into it, yet have an idea of what the risk is. when going in. How would I know what that is? Find someone that's already done it or has a little bit of has some expertise in that area. So I knew I didn't know how to do the contract stuff. I didn't know what repairs were, but I knew that I knew I can comp, and I knew I can find the ARV and what it could be worth if we fixed it up. And so again, YouTube University found the people who did it well, multiple folks, and who said the same consistent thing back to back. And when I found one of the first homes from this realtor, she gave me multiple. But when I came into contact with her, like I said, I didn't know what to do construction wise. So I actually brought in Paul, and I think this is like my first. It was either my first or second one. But Paul was the one that had a great idea of what the repairs on this would be. He also brought the buyer in for that deal. We negotiated accordingly to a solid price. He brought in the buyer at a higher price. We knew what the repairs would be, so we can actually have a decent idea of how to bake in our actual fee for someone to buy that contract from us. And then it went from there. Don't do it alone. Don't do it by yourself. I would probably do the same thing that I've been doing in that aspect.
I love that, man. It's funny how often that comes up when we bring people on, folks that have been successful, right? Where they say, hey, you have to be able to make quick decisions. And one of the best ways to do that is to have people in your corner who do the things well that, maybe you don't know how to do yet, or maybe you're not, the most gifted in. So I love what you said there. How about you, Paul?
So I learned the wrong things from my first deal. So my very first deal, like I said, it was a lead I got through networking, and it was a hard money lender gave me a call. They had refinanced a house, or not refinanced. They had repoed a house from an investor, and they wanted some quotes on a roof repair. So I went over there, and it was like a $1,300 repair. I was going to make $300. It was just super exciting. But I knew who they were, and I knew that they took down deals or they took back deals. And so I was like, hey, I'd actually like to meet in person. And I went over there, and I sat down with the lady to put up this contract for this repair. And I started asking if they had other deals, and they said, yeah, we have some big ones in Bishop Arts, but I don't think that's good for someone for a first time deal. But we do have this one for 70,000, and it's over here. And I was like, okay, I'll go look at it. And it was in Old East Dallas, and this is 2019, and this was a 104-year-old house with 750 square foot. The appraiser came in super low on it because it was so small as far as the house, and that's the only way he looked at it. Mm-hmm. When I got there and looked at it, down the street, they were tearing down homes and building mansions on the same street. And so it wasn't like 2 streets over, it was that street. And so I knew it was worth more than 70. I didn't know how much more, but it was kind of a gamble. And so I had just met a banker, a good friend of mine now, and she helped me get a loan, their portfolio bank. For this, that was going to be a rental loan that involved like fix up and repair. And I borrowed down payment money from my grandmother. And I went and I just purchased it. It needed everything except the roof. And then I found out that the person who the hard money company had bought it off of had bought it for $215 originally. And so I just put it on the market as is at $189, and I eventually got an offer at $179. And I made a ton of money. I 37 days, I made like $92,000 or $3,000. And so the things that taught me after mowing a property once and just kind of stumbling into it was that I'm awesome. I'm a rock star at this, and I can't make any mistakes. And so that definitely taught me the wrong things. But it taught me a couple of good things. Was I took that money, I put it through a 1031 exchange, because the 1031 exchanges, you have to intend to keep it for a year, and I did. I initially was going to keep it as a rental while the area appreciated. And I bought 2 more properties through the same lender, and those were the ones that really taught me my lessons, because I had all my money from that dumped in there, and then both of those projects went very, very, very wrong. And so I got through them. I had to borrow money from private investors and family and whoever I could get some funds off of, I would, to survive. But those were the ones that taught me the good lessons. The one that was really easy and I made more money than I'd ever seen in my life was the one that taught me the wrong things.
Isn't that how it goes in life? It's so true. No matter what you're doing, when things are going smooth, it's great, right? Enjoy it. Take advantage of that. We'll go along for the ride, but you're not maybe probably building a ton of character or learning a lot. And then something goes sideways, and it's what you do with that. So are you then overcoming that with that initial, hey, this is easy, anybody could do this, right? And I saw a lot of that, by the way, in the stock market during the pandemic when I was still working at Fidelity, where you can throw a dart at any stock and it would triple. So how do you handle that when it turns on you? I think says a lot about your character. So okay, pivoting over to you guys as partners. I talk a ton with people in the business, and I get a lot of different opinions from folks, sometimes very strong opinions on, hey, you have to work with a partner, or absolutely over my dead body would I work with a partner. I need to be in control of my own destiny, make all my own decisions. So I'm curious for you guys. Mumbo, you kind of touched on it a little bit in terms of how you guys met already. Take me back to that point in time. You guys didn't start real estate together. So what made you decide to partner up together? And, what was it about each other that you thought, hey, this person will make a good business partner? And how do you guys complement each other now when you partner on deals?
Yeah, he was white and I was black, and that I'm joking. I don't. You can cut. I'm sure you can cut that out.
It was a
No, there was there was as we were going through things together, like us individually having our things, we recognized there was a gap in expertise. And when there's a gap in expertise, I personally have learned, especially now with Paul, networking with credible individuals is a better route to go than trying to do everything or scale by yourself. I have a like the dreams and the vision is big, but I'm willing to take things at a slower pace with people that I actually trust. And so over time, as when we did our first deal together, knowing how that helped him and how that helped me, over as we kept in touch throughout that time after that deal, recognize, man, Paul was going through a lot of changes in his life, and then me likewise. And I realized we can have cordial conversations, agreements and disagreements, yet have a firm foundation on things where many people don't have, right? Like,
Yeah.
but our idea is, hey, like, are they following through when they say that they're going to do something? Are they competent or working towards competency when they're aiming for this goal? Man, how has that actually worked altogether? What's their genuine communication with other people? Are they likable? Those are the things in my eyes that I was looking at when reviewing these kind of conversations with Paul, and Paul will tell you, and you can take over at this point, Paul. But when we decided to work together, it was just over time I identifying, hey, like these are things that I actually enjoyed about you, and that we're not that far off from our direction. And so until whatever has to happen, let's actually continue in this idea of working on projects together intentionally. If I made money on this project, if I brought it in this way, or if I'm taking the more of the risk, yeah, I'll ask for a higher portion. But you brought it in and you helped me with this, or you're bringing in more deals. Let's operate that way. Just coming to an agreement of, here's my expectation, here's the standard, will we follow through, here's what that is going to look like, let's keep going. So
Yeah, Mumbo and I met in college. So we both went to A&M Commerce, which I guess is East Texas State now. And he was a freshman, I was a senior, but we got along well. We were in similar ministry stuff at the time, and that's how we got to know each other and build certain levels of trust. And so that it made for an easy transition when I was already starting to get experience. When he brought me that first deal that I then brought the buyer, and we put the contract together and all that kind of stuff. For both of us being fairly personable people, that was I think one of the things I learned on that was beneficial is that we actually play well together when talking with people, because I think, if I remember correctly, we were actually the lowest offer on, but because they liked us and they trusted us, they went with us. And so I was able to show some experience, and then we were able to show that we cared by not just like, oh well, this house is a dump and all this stuff. It really wasn't that bad. They just needed to move. And I knew what the repairs were going to be, and I was able to talk them through it, and I told them about some of my experiences, and I was actually going through some of those terrible deals still that I mentioned earlier that were the big lesson learners. And so we were able to pull that deal off, and that was a big. I think the big learning thing there was, even with a client, don't ever treat them like a dollar sign, because we didn't, and that's how we won, even though we were one of the lower offers, if not the lowest. And so caring about people, that's a big thing. And then seeing how we work together in those situations was another really big thing.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. So for those of you who don't know, listening to this show, so when I sat down with these guys, I had met Paul I think once before. Mumbo, I hadn't met you at all. And it took maybe 5 minutes for me to realize like you guys are legit, you're genuine, you're authentic. So, it really, obviously shines through when you're having those conversations with sellers too. And so I appreciate you sharing that because I think a lot of people in real estate, they get so hyper focused on numbers and it is a numbers game. And I get that. I mean, I'm a lender, right? Like I totally understand the numbers need to pencil out. But if you lose sight of the people, then you're going to quickly start to lose, right? And you lose your perspective. And so you sharing that all about how you enter into that conversation with humility, I love that. That's awesome. So when you do run into things where you're not on the same page in terms of, maybe there's a disagreement or some kind of conflict, like how do you guys work through that? How do you handle that?
Yeah, it's honestly to whoever's the most wisest on or has the most experience in that area, jokingly and not jokingly. Like I don't think there's been a, and Paul, you can correct me if you like, but I do not remember a moment where I seen something different and then Paul didn't acknowledge it and just simply followed up either with a rebuttal or a different idea that we can follow it. And so more often than not, we're going through we look at all options that are available and say, hey, like which one is more risky? What is our current focus? And then what's the better move to go from there? I think we got to that point because one of the other homes that we did together, we were going back and forth and renting and making it into an Airbnb and trying to do one thing versus another thing. And we just kept it on the market for way too long. And although we profited from it, it was less profit. It was less profit that we had if we would have just went with our original idea, which was just to flip it instead of renting it. That's the closest that I can think of where there was a little bit of a back and forth over time, but it wasn't anything. It wasn't anything crazy. I think we're pretty agreeable as long as as long as whatever that idea is. We're not making a decision based on greed. We're not making a decision based on trashing people, and we're genuinely just trying to follow suit with what we said that we would.
I think the only thing that is a conversation that's been long going is our end goal of like where we want to be. Do we want to end up in commercial? Do we want to end up with a bunch of single family homes? Where do we want to go and what's the benefit
Jumping the
of
gun on
that?
my next question. Keep going.
Okay. Well, this ties into our disagreement. I know I'm biased and I love single family homes because that's what I'm good at. And I know I can pull it off. But there's also benefits to some of the larger deals that Mumbo likes because he has more experience over there with a larger network in that place, people doing mobile home parks, whatever. And so, but I know I don't know what I don't know. And so to me, that makes me hesitant to want to jump over there, even though eventually I would love to do a deal over there. But for now, I'm definitely very entrenched in the single family world. So that would be our
Yeah.
ongoing
No,
agreement.
again, like just I'm hearing a theme, right? And Mumbo, you kicked off your answer with, well, whoever has the most wisdom in that situation, well, that requires something that is a struggle for most human beings, myself included, which is to admit that you're not the wisest on something and to submit to the other person. That's not that easy to do. So again, like these are really important. So I hope everyone's listening and picking up on this. Like that's huge. And it's not necessarily innate in our human nature, like to be approaching a business relationship with humility. And for me, with my brother being my business partner, that requires me to do the same thing with a sibling. So I love that. Okay, so Paul, you kind of gave me a little bit of a preview there, and I wanted to round out the show today with what's next for you guys, what's on the horizon, what's the next chapter. So can you expound a little bit there on what you said and what you wanted, where do you want to go from here?
Sure. Short term, or at least midterm, we're looking at getting heavier into flips and maybe like single family builds to be sold because our main hurdle we've had is liquidity, where I've done a lot of like the Burr method kind of thing. Equity is great, but you can still go bankrupt with a lot of equity. So liquidity is the grease in the machine or the fuel
Yeah.
for the machine. I don't know, whatever. And so right now it's about stacking liquidity. And so that's the short term, but the long term idea behind that is to be able to pick up equity because holding a property, again, whether it's single family or commercial, the wealth is built because of the long term inflation. Inflation is something that's built into our economic model. And every loan we take in the long run, if you're paying off something 30 years later, you're paying it with much cheaper dollars. And so you're using somebody else's money to pay a loan that holds an asset. It's a pretty beautiful thing that's you can do with that. And so that's the goal, is to get the liquidity to pick up the equity.
Same thing
Mumbo,
for
do
you,
you have
Mumbo?
My boy said it. That's essentially a lot of our direction outside of like, do we want like 500 single families or a few RV park, or like whatever it is, whatever we decide on, it's going to be have some liquidity, heavy on equity, build out from there.
Okay. If you guys need funding on an RV park, let me know. We'll look at it. I was looking at one the other day, so it would look pretty
Really?
good.
That's good.
Yeah. 100%. Well, all right. Well, let's recap today. So I heard some really cool stuff. Paul, you started us off with, hey, I walked into this like slam dunk, no brainer, made a ton of money. Now, the world is my oyster. And as we know, the longer we do this real estate thing, it takes twists and turns. You got to have perseverance, you got to have grit. And then having someone come alongside you, whether it's when you're starting off and you have that mentor, that coach, but then also for you guys having that partnership where that iron sharpens iron is just so huge, right? So thank you guys for sharing a little bit of your experience, why you're doing what you're doing, how you approach those conversations with people, and get past that stigma of price is maybe the most important thing. So I just appreciate the transparency today. If folks want to connect with you, get to know you, reach out to you, what's the best way for folks to get in contact?
Shoot me a text or give me a call at 214-810. I'm a pretty simple, as long as we set a time to get together with, that's the easiest way to get in touch with me.
Yeah, you can also shoot me a text at 214-497-5313. That would work for me. Or my Instagram or Facebook. You can hit me up there, and that would be Paul Carlson.
All right. I love it. Bam. We'll get that included in the show notes. So, if y'all have questions about flipping or BRRRRs or, partnerships or finding mentors, you heard it all here today. So reach out to Mumbo, reach out to Paul. I know these guys and they're really, really good guys, really good human beings. So thanks again, guys, for coming on, and we will catch you all next time.